This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now on the Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre through Isotope, RX, and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
I got laid off from my job my home. I got laid off on Christmas Eve, and I didn't work for 3 months. I didn't go back to work. And I had to hustle, man. And I started doing live gigs. I started doing every session I could possibly do. I started trying to talk people into making records. And then this opportunity to move to Springfield, Missouri came up, and I took it because I had nothing to lose at that point.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. In my studio, I've got the Mac Mini M1 paired up with the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution to connect to all my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre provides unequaled headroom and linear output regardless of transient audio peaks, capturing critical details from your microphone. The 100 series amplifiers were used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, and the Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, and John Lennon. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio at spectra1964.com or call them at 801-797-0642. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Vance Powell, a multi-Grammy award-winning producer, engineer, and mixer, and owner of Sputnik Sound in Nashville, Tennessee, with Mitch Dane. Vance's credits include Chris Stapleton, the White Stripes, Arctic Monkeys, and Wolfmother, to name just a few of the many records he's worked on. Vance is, of course, a repeat guest here on the podcast, and if you'd like to go back and hear his origin story on episode Recording Studio Rockstars 2, he was one of the very first on the show. And then, of course, we've done a couple of great mixing episodes on 171 and 293. So we'll try and have some links to those in the show notes as well. Vance recently did a big studio makeover over at Sputnik Sound, installing a Dolby Atmos surround system for mixing into the future of immersive audio. So we can talk more about Atmos and mixing, of course. And I've got a bunch of great questions from you rock stars from our Facebook group, which if you're not in, please go join it at facebook.com/groups/recording studio rockstars, and we'll let you right in. So glad to have you back here, Vance. Please welcome Vance Powell back to Recording Studio Rockstars. Vance, are you ready to rock again, my friend?
I'm happy to be back.
Dude, great to have you, man. And thanks for joining us on Skype and setting all this stuff up. I don't know if the rock stars know, but sometimes this stuff is a little bit of a pain to get it working, but we do it because we love it.
It's funny, our here we are, audio professionals, and we're set to record everybody but ourselves all the time.
Exactly.
And I actually am sort of set up to record myself because I kind of do this quite often. But Lid uses Skype, and that's complicated, and so we just look. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, the funny thing about this podcast is we can reveal the behind the scenes because our audience actually cares. So the reason I use Skype is, one, because I've been using it, two, because it works for me, and three, there's a plug-in that goes in that automatically records the call, and that wasn't a given back in the day. I think Zooms and all that kind of stuff now all sort of have built-in recording things, but It's funny. It's like you'd think you could just use anything, but then you record with it and you listen to it back and you realize it might sound like crap. So this one seems to work pretty well, but thank you for doing it, man.
Well, you're most welcome. I don't know if you have ever, if anyone here has ever been to a NAMM show or anything like that, but the worst live sound or of anything is AES conventions and NAMM shows. They're the worst. Yeah. AES convention is the worst. And, it's just, like what's the worst thing that could happen? You get, 1,000 talented audio engineers in one room and shit goes south.
Do you think that's true of other professions like, auto mechanics and things like that? Or do they have really nice cars?
I don't know. Maybe.
Dentists. Is there a bunch of bad dentistry at a dental convention?
Yeah. I did an AES panel. Was that AES? Yeah, it was AES a couple years back. And I had brought my Apollo to play some tracks back. And the audio company didn't have 1/4-inch to XLRs. I mean, like, can you just get a couple DIs? Like, oh, we don't have any DIs. Like, okay. So I spoke for 30 minutes through the deal while they went and I said, just why don't you go down there? Somebody's got to have a DI. Go borrow a couple DIs. It's that simple. But they had an 1/8-inch. That was their plan. People just plug in an 1/8-inch, and I was like, well. Doesn't quite work that way, Unless you have an 1/8-inch 1/4-inch adapter, and they're like, oh, we don't have that.
All right, so real world question here. You just redid a bunch of stuff in your studio, and one of the things related to what you're talking about that is basically assumed, it's a given as a studio person, is we have to have the cable, the adapter, the plug-in thing, and we have to know where it is without thinking about it. What's the first thing that comes to mind for you about like having all that stuff? If you needed that, whatever adapter you just mentioned, if you needed that right now, how would you find it in your own studio?
Oh, well, I mean, they're right there.
They're just right there.
They're right back there. So yeah, I mean, part of the deal is you have to well, first of all, if you have had a studio for any period of time, right? And I have had this studio in this building for 7 years. And then I think we were in the old building for about 7 years, about 8 years, to be honest with you. So it's been a while. So, man, I've got cables. I've got adapters. I've got adapters that people didn't even know they needed. Like I have 600 ohm Y cables. Now, does anybody here know why anyone would want a 600 ohm Y cable?
I'm thinking about Abbey Road, but I thought everything there was 200 ohms.
Well, 600 ohm Y cable basically would allow you to hook two mixers together, or if you wanted to hook two microphones together. To one.
Oh, so if the output of two mixers, or is this the input of two mixers from one microphone?
The output of two mixers.
Because you can't just use a raw cable, because then you get this weird.
Yep, that doesn't work. You have to have the resistors in there. So. But they do work really nice for things like I really want to record top and bottom toms. So a 600 ohm Y cable and a phase flip, you can do that on one channel if you need to.
Now I've done with just a raw cable. I've done like a 57 on top and bottom of a snare and a Y cable and had them blend to a single output. Should that work if it's a matching pair of microphones because they would have the same impedance on the output?
It does. Yeah, it shouldn't work, but it probably did. But one of them was out of phase.
Right. I might have phase flipped the cable.
Yeah, there you
go. Interns with too much time on their hands at studios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but a phase flip would work. The problem is that I often find that depending on the song, I want more of the bottom snare or less. So that would be the conundrum there.
All right, here's a trick question. Can you think of any anecdotes where an intern went out of their way to do something for a studio and it was like the most absurd, nice gesture, but just like they built something that everybody was like, we're never going to use that?
The only one that comes to mind is that there is a studio owner here in town who was an intern at the time at a famous studio. And one of the folks said that they thought the floor of the control room was getting pretty beat up. And so overnight, he sanded the floor of the studio.
And then they came in and they were like, why is there sawdust in all the gear?
That's exactly right.
Holy shnikes. Yeah, I think some of my gestures were like, I boxed up an entire box full of cables over the weekend, and I shipped them from the studio on a Southwest airline flight to Texas for a Willie Nelson session for an engineer without asking permission from the studio owner. And I was the intern. I thought I was just helping out. And, and Monday morning he was like, you did what?
Yeah. And now the studio has no mic cables.
Yeah.
Well, no, nothing like that's ever happened. I mean, I don't know. We don't keep a lot of interns around. So, and when we do, we tend to, we vet them out really well. And, their ability to do things like that would be pretty limited.
Yeah. You've had some great interns and we've had guests on the show that were your interns and assistants. So we look forward to more of that. Mm-hmm. The other silly thing was going home for Christmas break, and I was feeling so good about being at the studio. I wanted to buy a studio gift. So I went to a store and I got a rain stick, and I brought it back and proudly presented it to the studio. And that was the very first time I ever learned that the rain stick is typically the butt of jokes in studios.
Yeah, you might as well have just got a didgeridoo while you were at it. Just, a didgeridoo and a rain stick.
I'm sure I was wearing my tie-dye and my elfin boots when I turned it in.
Yeah, or your Birkenstocks.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So back to seriousness now. Speaking of studio overhauls, tell us what's going on for you over there. You've done some pretty cool stuff, and I think you just recently kind of got we're around the holidays now as we record this, Rockstars, but it'll come out later on. And you recently got a bunch of new stuff going.
Yeah. So, well, the first and foremost thing is I started getting some requests for Atmos mixing. And at the time that it came in, it was just right after Apple's, decision to bring out spatial audio. And I couldn't get in anywhere in town. So a few of the rooms in town that had basically been open for the last 2 years, suddenly I couldn't get into. And so my manager and I, we sort of got together and talked about it. And we decided, I decided first and foremost that there was a couple things I wanted to change in my control room that were more of a fix, so to speak, than anything else. And one of those was that I had a weird little low frequency thing with the way the wall was shaped behind my console. And then the other one was I wanted to, I didn't really want to upgrade my speakers because, to be honest with you, I really loved my speakers.
Your speakers are great, man.
And I still have them. I just don't have them in here anymore. They're up front. I didn't really want to get rid of those or anything. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get something that I knew was going to work in Atmos and was going to fulfill sort of the idea of the old one. So what I went with was ATCs. I'm a big ATC fan. And so you can't see it, but I have two ATC 110s here, an ATC 50 here in the center. So ATC 110s left and right, ATC 50, one of the center line ones in the center, ATC 25s on the side, ATC 25s in the back, and ATC 12 eyes up above. It's a 714 setup. And I'm set up with the Dolby Matrix, or not Dolby Matrix, an Avid Matrix. And I monitor it using the Dadman with the Dadmom monitor controller.
All right, we'll dig more into that stuff to sort of understand it. But
well, it's super nerdy. Here's the thing to know. is that all of that building just got done. I just got the room tuned and certified by Dolby. And then I've been busy. So have I done any Atmos stuff? Not yet. I've fooled around with it. I've done a few test mixes. It's a complex beast. You know, there's a lot of things that stereo mixing that we've been doing with stereo mixing things you just can't really do.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of like do it in other ways. There's a lot of information, opinion, disinformation, and technology is all sort of like changing constantly here. So, you know, Apple's made it complicated, and we can get into that in a minute, but Apple's made it complicated to like listen to anything in real time. You really can't. You have to print the mix, so to speak. You have to master it, and then you have to ship it. And you know, and then you have to listen to it on headphones and try to make a decision listening on headphones to something you just did 5 minutes ago, which is always tough.
Well, that's how most of the rest of us feel all the time anyway.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I don't know, you know, it's a moving target to a degree, and it's an evolving technology. We're very early in on it.
Yeah.
I would say, and this is one of those, you know, this tweet didn't time out. I will say that Atmos is probably the first real scalable format for surround or stereo or binaural that we've ever had. Considering that.
Yeah. What are some of the reasons that make you feel that way?
Well, the Atmos master file will play back from headphones in binaural. It'll render a binaural file all the way to a Dolby Cinema file. And that means through all the iterations, through 914, through 916, 13, 1116, 11, you know, 1316, you know, all these different formats. It'll go through all of those. And that's important. 5.1 never did that. 5.1 was locked to 5.1.
Doesn't isn't like the full iteration of it something like 20 something speakers? Doesn't Belmont University have a theater?
Oh no,
where
it's
got like
more.
20?
It's more than that because it's I think it's 9 across the front or 7 across the front, 11 down the side, each side, 11 across the back, and 22 over the top.
Wow.
That's a cinema, Dolby Cinema.
Right.
And there's one here. I know there's one in Nashville down in Franklin there's a big Dolby Vision, Dolby theater.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, well, that's good to know. I'll have to go see a good film there.
Went and saw Dune there, and it was amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so then just for the rock stars who are, you know, there's always somebody's deep into this thinking already. Somebody's like, well, wait, what is this all about again? So to reiterate very quickly, Atmos is an immersive sound mixing system that gives us more of a three-dimensional feel to it, and you can have sounds in front of you and above you and below you and to the sides and behind you. Not below you. Okay, all right.
That's the Sony.
Okay, all right, great.
Sony has speakers below you. I don't want any speakers below me blowing up my skirt, you know. So I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but
you wouldn't. Couldn't you just put it in your beard?
Yeah.
Just have like beard surround.
Yeah.
And then
says a guy who cut his off.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm just trying to look sharp here today. But you know, then when you're throwing all these numbers out, these 13s, 9s, 7s, and everything, Rockstars, essentially there are many different speaker arrays,
right,
for playing back the sound. And what I'm understanding about Atmos is you can create one master file and it will translate because of the way it's designed. It'll translate to all these different systems.
Well, that
theoretically work well on all of them.
Right. The Dolby renderer renders these files into your mix from Pro Tools or whatever you're doing it from, renders it into a stream of data and metadata that does the panning and all that. And that will play. So here in my room, I have a 714, right? My friend Reed Shippen and Pete Lyman, they have a 914. Now, what's the difference? Well, 914 means across the front, you have 5 speakers. You have a left wide, you have left, you have center, you have right, and right wide. I couldn't do a wide here because where the wide would be, I have a door. So unless I want to put a speaker in a door, that doesn't really work. On this side of my room, which you guys can't see, but on the left side of my room, I could have done it over there, but it would have been a little bit wonky. As it is, my left side speaker is in my rack.
It's in the rack.
It's in the rack.
Wow.
So I had to take some gear out, build a little platform, a little ISO platform, and mount it in the rack. And then on the right side, it's just next to my door. So I could only do 714. Now, 4 means the 4 above me. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 above me. There also is 712, and there's 716. And there's probably even more. But I think 716 is about as big. That's, I think, what Blackbird has is 716. Or 7 or 9. I don't exactly know what Blackbird has because I think they have 2 sides. But there's all these different formats. Basically, it just means as the room gets bigger, you need more speakers.
Right.
What it comes down to. You can have 2 sides, and you could have 4 rear surrounds. You can have 4 surrounds. You can have all kinds of different things. The Dolby renderer sets it up to do that.
Now,
and then
let me ask you this question. So,
by the way, I want you guys to know I am not the end all of Dolby knowledge.
Right.
There's a lot more people that know more about it than me. I'm still just learning it.
Yeah.
And so some of this may be, hit me back in a year and I'll be like, I was completely full of shit.
Well, and that's the thing too. A reminder, Rockstars, we do these interviews early. So by the time this comes out, Vance will be much more of an expert with it, I'm sure. So
yeah, maybe.
But the cool thing about it is I think it's good though, because I think that, nobody, there are rare, far and few between experts about this stuff out there. So we're all trying to figure out what it means. And I really do honestly think that, people like yourself who are creating the mixes in this new format are going to define and help determine,
right.
What it means.
Have you had Mills Logan on?
Not yet, no.
You need to have him because probably he's the closest thing to an Atmos expert that we have here in Nashville.
Okay,
I would say. Mills has probably done more Atmos. Him and David Leonard have probably done more Atmos mixes than anybody here in Nashville.
Yeah, David's great. I listened to some of his mixes some years ago, I guess before we all kind of closed down. And it was impressive to go listen.
Oh, David's an amazing engineer. He's really amazing.
Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always someone in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to add collaborators to a project so that the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music. Just upload a voice memo or song and start commenting. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at Samply.app or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. Want to know how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? Well, I've been cheating all along by using Isotope RX and Ozone on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, EQ, and limiting on this podcast episode. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. When you think about these different room sizes and, more or less speakers, what it means, what the experience is, at this point, do you think that what you create is you're meant to sit in the middle of this thing and listen to it? Or are you going to think about it where no matter where you are in the room, you should have this kind of cool experience.
I think it's just like stereo. You got to kind of be in the sweet spot. But here's the interesting part. The sweet spot as a mixer is also the sweet spot as a binaural listener.
Right.
So if you're mixing in the speaker array, it should translate into binaural. Now, notice I say should. Obviously 2 speakers, there's no concept of height. There's all this. And then Apple's implementation of spatial audio, from what I understand, they throw out anything in the height channels. They just throw that out. So if you were trying to be tricky, and there are cool ways to do this, where you could have like the vocal just coming out from above, the God voice. So
right.
It would go to Apple and it would be like, nope. So now to be honest with you, again, I don't know that's true, but that is exactly what I've been told.
Yeah.
So here's also a few things I believe. Notice I'm going to say I believe, but I don't really know. I always wanted to have a talk show here in Nashville called I don't know, but I'm pretty sure. Well, actually, that's a Bill Maher joke. That's a Bill Maher joke. Right. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure. So I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that Dolby and Apple are working together to find a way to get an online renderer of sorts to content creators. Again, I don't know that, but everybody and their brother wants it. Everybody's bitching about it. And usually when people are bitching about it and want it, and they're the people creating the thing that's going to create monetary value for Dolby and for Apple, some enterprising young engineer will be, oh, well, I can do that, blah, 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 and in about 5 hours, write an online renderer. Now, I would think that, but I know it's much more complicated than that. So I don't know. We'll see.
Let's clarify what that means again. So essentially, if we're mixing in stereo, generally, I think we can all appreciate this feeling of I'm trying to get it to sound right, but when I'm done with this thing, is it going to change and sound different when I listen to it back later? And that's what you're describing with Atmos.
Think about it this way. Think about it like, okay, I've got the stereo mix. It sounds great, right? I can listen to it on my multiple sets of speakers and it sounds good. It translates. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to send it to Apple. Now Apple gets it, right? And then they dissect the mix, move things around, and put it out. And when you hear back the stereo, you're like, hold it, this is totally not what I thought it was going to be. That's exactly what's happening with Atmos and spatial audio.
Right.
Yes, most of it, the idea of it translates. But again, things like height and certain parts of the Atmos world where you're dealing with widths, those things it's very tweaky little things to get Apple to sort of get it done the same. Yeah. Because Apple is not using Dolby's renderer for their playback. Now, why is that? Well, because they wrote their own.
Right. And a way for us to think about a renderer is it's almost like a robot remixer, because it's actually taking stuff and rebalancing a little bit or positioning.
No, you're hearing, when you're mixing in Atmos, you're not hearing your Pro Tools session. You're hearing the Pro Tools session being fed into the renderer.
Right.
And then the renderer running in real time, right? And spitting that back to your speakers. So the signal path for this, for Atmos mixing in the way that I have it, now see, there's 2 ways to do this. One is using the Dolby Audio Bridge, and the other is using a separate renderer, remote renderer. So I send my tracks to the Matrix. The Matrix turns it into Dante. Dante sends it over my network to the renderer, which is a Mac Mini in a rack. That's it's actually connected to nothing. It has no keyboard connected to it. It has no monitor connected to it. And then that renderer sends it back via Dante back to my monitor controller. So Pro Tools is just the device going to the renderer. The renderer is doing all the mixing. And because of the way the renderer works, the renderer is also trying to be efficient in the way that it handles the audio streams. Because you can have up to 128 objects. There's two types of things in Atmos. There's beds and objects. You can have up to 128 objects flowing at once. Those objects could be multiple channels. And those objects are panning around in space. So the Atmos renderer has to pick areas and put objects combining, because otherwise the data entropy would be so big, it couldn't do it. So it's constantly rendering these files in real time. And it's really, really cool technology. It's a learning curve, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind to think I have 192 channels. Is that right? Yeah. 192 channels of audio over Dante flowing through the same Ethernet network that you and I are talking about.
That is pretty wild.
Now, I don't have it going right now, but if I was passing 48K data back and forth like crazy, because it's all 48K, if I'm passing that data back, I on average, it has, 40 or 50 with beds and objects, different things. The few little mixes that I've been testing and working on, that's basically how many audio files. Some tracks I've seen are way, way, way more than that even.
Yeah, so we're not going to be doing this. We're not going to be busting out my old Apple G3 and trying to, fire off one of these mixes.
Well, here's what's funny. It doesn't take a lot of power. It doesn't take a lot of power to do it, because it takes a machine that's hooked to a chassis that has a Dante card in it that will talk to a matrix.
Yeah.
It does require, to have a remote renderer, it does require you have an Avid matrix. And once you get the matrix, which is very expensive, by the way.
Okay.
Very expensive. And then the Dante cards, which are equally expensive. And once you get all that set up, you still have to have something to play it back. So now you have to have a monitoring situation. So what I have is I have 3 cards in my HDX, 3 HDX cards. Goes to I have my burls on the first card. I have a 2432 burl set up there on my first card. Then the second card goes to the matrix. And then the matrix sends that over Dante to the renderer. The renderer comes back to a Focusrite ADR16. And that's my speaker playback A to D, or D to A.
Right. Which, what did you say? That was 714. You have to have
714. I have to have 12 channels.
Yeah. Right. Outputs, 12 outputs to be able to handle the speakers.
The cool thing about the matrix is the matrix, you can put different cards in it. It's a very, very, very powerful situation with the matrix. But I have an SPQ card. Now that SPQ card is a mixer, DSP, EQ, delay, all that stuff. And one of the things I have, I'm actually spitting out 16 channels of audio because I have 4 subs in here. So I have 2 behind my desk and I have 2 behind me. 2 behind my desk are purely LFE. That's just the LFE channel, the low frequency, the effects, the boom, the explosion channel, right? But the 2 in the back are bass managed side and rear. So in other words, they're speakers to make my rear speakers bigger.
Yeah. I was watching some YouTube stuff on Atmos just to try and get a better understanding of it myself. And I forgot who it was, but they were talking about mixing some electronic music and how one of the tricks was feeding some of the sub of the kick to the back speakers as well, because it makes it feel, you want to retain that sense of power and stuff.
Yeah.
What are some thoughts that you have about, like I noticed you haven't mentioned the SSL, for example, yet. Where are some places that you think the analog gear is going to come into play in an Atmos mix?
Well,
and I know that you don't know the answers until you've done this for a while, and then you say, here's what works.
I've been experimenting. Initially, I initially was trying to get the SSL because I have it set up so that my SSL will spit a 5.1 out of it. So in the Atmos world, there are two types of audio channels. There are beds and there are objects. Now, here's the best way I can explain these. A bed can be any number of speakers. So a bed could be, or channels, I should say. A bed could be 714, right? It could be stereo. It could be 5.1. It could be 7.1. It could be whatever. But the way the renderer works is those bed channels hardwire your tracks to speakers. Okay, now what does that mean exactly? That means that in the bed, the left speaker will always be the left speaker. Now, normally, okay, well, that makes total sense, right? That makes sense. Okay, but let's say you have a side speaker, right? Like I have a side speaker here. If I put something purely in the side of the bed, and then I take my file over to Blackbird, and their side, they have two sides, my file will come out one side. In other words, like they have a side front and a side rear. Mine will come out the side front.
Right.
So if I was to take my 7.1 bed and just do a mix in a 7.1 bed and then take it down to the theater down in Franklin that has, 11 speakers on the side, mine would just come out one. But if I use an object, it would come out any of them the object is near.
Right. Because the object is like this moving.
Well, in the sides, you can pan through the bed. You can pan a file through the bed. You're just panning through a fixed speaker setup.
You're really going to earn your engineer wings on this one, man. I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, man, it took me a week to get my head around the freaking, Dante. So Pro Tools IO matrix, right? The Dadman matrix for the matrix, and then the Dante matrix that controls Dadman. They're all different. So if you could just like put your head around 3 different IO setups and realize that some of these things can go to Pro Tools and some of them don't have anything to do with Pro Tools. Pro Tools only does certain things. It only captures certain things. It's all like, oh man, it took me forever to get it figured out. And I had to have a little help. And I'm not afraid to say it. I had to have help.
All right.
And again, I'm not the genius of this. You really should get Mills, because Mills could definitely speak to it much more. Or Pete Lyman. Who's having to master this.
Wow.
Now think about that. Because like with Atmos, there aren't bus compressors. I mean, there's no bus limiter for this. There's no all these things. There's only certain ways to do it. It's an interesting idea.
All right. Well, so I don't want to be a dud man, but what is a Dadman?
Oh, okay. Dadman is a piece of software. DAD is Digital Audio Denmark. And Dadman is a piece of software that runs in the background, or it just has to run all the time you're using the matrix. And it does all the monitor control with what's called the Dad Mom, which is this thing, by the way. It's that. It's a monitor controller. The monitor controller is completely virtual. In other words, no audio comes or goes out of it. In some ways, it's the perfect monitor controller. Because I'm not saying I'm going to forever move to this, because I have an Avocet and love it.
Yeah.
But it gives you 3 speaker setups, 3 sources, and then it gives you 4 other buttons and a volume control. Every one of those buttons can be anything you want it to be. So a speaker control doesn't have to be a speaker. It could be an input. The source control could be anything. It could be a speaker. The volume control could, that doesn't make much sense to be anything but volume control. But there's a ref, a cut, a talkback, and a dim. All four of those can be anything you want it to be. Now, they set up ref for Atmos mixing, so you could do the stereo, like the stereo track when you're doing an Atmos of a previously mixed record, which is what most people are doing now, right?
Right.
To some degree. You could set up the ref out of Dadman to throw to that button. You hit that button, you hear the stereo mix through the two speakers. So, and then you've got a cut, which is cut, that makes sense, and dim, which is dim, all of it again programmable. But then you have 4 layers to each one of this pages. So you can have 4 layers of all that. So what I have is I have my speakers set up as 714, 5.1, and stereo. And I can hit with the sources, I have 714 renderer, a 5.1 re-render, and a stereo re-render on my thing. And then if I go to the second layer, I have this crazy Chinese receiver that's made by a company called Tone Winner. That's a great name for a company, Tone Winner.
Yeah.
And the manual came in Chinese. And it is a 16-channel preamp that takes a Atmos stream from HDMI and puts it out 16 XLRs. And that goes back into one of my 8016s and comes up on Dadman. So I can put Tidal on an Apple TV 4K and play back raw Atmos files in my room. Because Tidal plays back Atmos.
Okay, so this is a way
Atmos.
for you to do your references, see what other things sound like.
Against other people, yeah.
Yeah.
And
hear your record once it's out.
Once it's out.
Yeah.
And I can watch, I can watch cool things on Apple TV and Atmos.
Right, because you never want to leave your studio after you're done working and you want to stay there and watch movies.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely not the case. I don't have a big enough screen, and I don't have a comfortable enough chair.
Yeah. If you're ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound great no matter what your studio situation, then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get great sounding mixes in your studio using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code Rockstar right now at checkout for 10% off any course for a limited time. Speaking about comforts and leaving the studio, I think I saw some images of you putting in a nice little swimming hole at your place.
Oh, it's been there. No, I moved in. When I moved in there, it was there. We've just been renovating. We back in 2019. It's actually funny. Back in 2018. On Thanksgiving, my parents were there. Right before Thanksgiving, our dishwasher blew a gasket. It literally blew a gasket and leaked water into the subfloor, and it had been leaking just a little bit for a while. And when they had put tile in our house, they didn't tile under the dishwasher. They just tiled up to the dishwasher. Right?
So it hit the wood.
So it hit the wood, so it rotted out all the subfloor under the tile. So we had to tear all that out. And when we did, we found out it had soaked up into our cabinets and into the drywall in the back and in the drywall downstairs, into the joists, all this stuff. Now, luckily, all the joists were fine. They were fine. But we had to tear out the ceiling in our basement. We had to tear out the floor. So I just said, screw it, man. I went to the bank. I got a big, home equity line, and we remodeled the whole top floor of our house.
Nice.
Put the kitchen in. And when we did, we had been needing to replace the fence around our pool. And so we redid the fence, which was way more expensive than I ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Rockstars, I know you like to think of Vance and some of our guests as having these perfect gilded lifestyles where nothing ever goes wrong. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear, though it's bad to hear.
The crazy part about this was that started in Thanksgiving and it got finished in August of the next year.
Yeah.
So I lived in a construction zone. We didn't have a kitchen for 2 months. I mean, when you don't have a kitchen, now we have a little basement downstairs. We have a sink downstairs, and I had moved my refrigerator downstairs. But I mean, there's no oven. It was nothing. So
you didn't just take on water fasting for 2 months?
Yeah, no, I didn't do anything like that. I wanted to just move out, but we couldn't do that either.
Speaking of renovations and how long things take, I mean, my studio took me, well over a year to kind of renovate it, and I'm thrilled now that I've got it going. But things do take a long time. Now, when you did your studio, you guys seem to be pretty efficient about getting the Atmos system put in. What are some lessons you learned about making the transition, getting it done at the right timing for you? Any stuff that was, if you did it again, you'd do it differently?
Well, I don't know how many of your listeners know, but I was the chief engineer at Blackbird. So I started there when we were rebuilding Studio A. So I was there for Studio A, Studio B, Studio C, Studio D, Studio E, Studio F, Studio G, all of those studios. So when you build a few studios, you learn like, okay, I've got these moving parts I've got to get figured out. So I've got to figure out who's going to do the construction. Luckily, a good friend of mine who I've known from way, way, way back, we made music together back in the 90s. He has been... he lives down in Florida, down on 30A, and he's been the supervisor of a construction crew down there building houses. And so he was like, look, I've got tools. We can do the work. So reached out to Michael Cronin, studio builder. And Mike came over, of course, full disclosure here. My wife at that point, she's not now. She just retired. My wife just retired, which is great from doing that. She's doing other things, but she was Michael Cronin's accountant for 14 years, or bookkeeper for 14 years. So I called Mike. I said, hey, can you come over and take a look at this? He came over. He's like, oh, man, Mike's Irish. He's like, oh, Mike, you got to do this. You got to do this. He drew out this thing and just handed it to me. He's like, all right, I got to go. I got to go to LA. And boom, off he went, And so he basically gave us the plan on what we were going to do. Then, in combination with Dolby and ATC, we figured out the speaker position, where the speakers should be, where the perfect place for them, and the not so perfect place, but we can work around it. Because even though people get super hung up in the, okay, well, here's what Dolby says, it has to be this, has to be this, has to be this. Real world things are different.
Yeah.
Dweezil Zappa Studio is the other studio that Dolby knows of with a speaker in the rack.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah,
on.
He's got tons of gear like me. He's got it on one side, so there's a speaker in the rack.
Hey, I'm putting in an official request here to help me get Dweezil on the show.
Cool.
I'd love to talk to him anytime.
I don't know him. I did at one point. He did reach out about me possibly mixing a record for him, and I was busy, so I couldn't do it. But
nice.
So there you go. That was one of those things. But,
well, the real world scenario is very real world. I mean, even mine. I've been working with Carl, and he did this wonderful job putting in his Phantom Focus system, which sounds wonderful. But as soon as I go to work, I'm like, all of a sudden I have to start putting things all over the place, and I need all these, like the symmetry. I lose my sense of symmetry in the room pretty quickly when I'm working. I mean, even just dumb, simple things like I'm like, well, I need a USB mic in front of me on the console here so that I can do a Zoom call or whatever. And, so there are a lot of things like that. But with you, so you did this stuff. Now, how long did it take you to put in all your speakers? Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, sure. So here, well, the big thing was ATC, PMC, Amphion, all these companies are selling speakers like they're going out of style. And then you've got supply chain issues. You've got, all this stuff. I luckily had a little window of time that I knew I could get it in. So if I was to take all the time that it took to do it, it would be about 4 weeks. So it was about a week and a half of building this wall here. And it was about another half week of getting all the Dolby, all the renderer, the cabling, all the stuff, to make this work. I bought a Bryston 9B, which is a 5-channel 3B, basically, to do these overs because they're not powered, but all the other speakers are powered.
Okay, all right.
So, we had to run speaker lines up through the ceiling and, down and, and then get the amp in, and the amp and the matrix and the 8016 all mount. I built a rack in this wall down here. So there's a rack in the wall, literally.
Right.
And then all that's back there. And then it's funny, I got the wall up, but I didn't have, Cronin was going to do whisper wall on this wall, which is a fabric over acoustic core. But he couldn't do it until the next week. So I had to make a record. So I recorded a whole record with nothing on this wall. And actually, to be honest with you, it was pretty great. It sounded really great. Just the acoustic, the only thing that really changed is that it took a little, once the wall went up, the image got better, which is what I expected it to do. But it took a little more low end. Because it's acoustic treatment, it's trapping a little bit of low end. Right. Whereas a solid just, so the wall, if you want to know what it is, the wall is 2x4s, about 7 inches out from the wall, and then it's about 48 inches wide, and then two 30-degree angles, right? All of that is filled all the way to the back wall with 8-pound rock wool. One side of this wall has 4.5 feet of rock wool.
Wow.
Solid rock wool.
So that's essentially trapping bass. It's controlling.
There's no port through it. Mm-hmm. It's just isolation. It makes that wall completely solid. Then it's a 5/8 sheet of plywood, right? And then a 3/8 sheet, or another 5/8 sheet of drywall, and then another set of 5/8 sheet of drywall sideways, so that none of the cracks.
Right. You have to right? seal the
green
seams
glue,
are.
Everything green glued between all of them, all drilled to the studs. And then on the outer face of it is 3/4 inch. It has a name. It's a tongue and groove subfloor. It's a very, very heavy, what is that stuff called? A Vantec subfloor. It's tongue and groove. So all that's glued, screwed, and mounted. And then on top of that is 2-inch, it's called acoustic core. And that's a 703 on top of a 1/2 inch foam piece. And then with fabric drawn over the top of it.
Good Lord. And so this is to create the wall that you're looking at when you're mixing.
Yes.
And so it's like a really solid foundation of a wall.
It's not moving. I can tell you it's not moving.
And so therefore the sound that's generated by the speakers is not going through that wall somewhere else. It's reflected back into the room.
Or it's absorbed.
Okay, cool. Right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me see. What did I want to ask you about that?
And then the over speakers were the real pain in the ass, because we also moved around all of my clouds that I had in here. Mm-hmm. I used to have 3 clouds, 1 over the desk, 2 back here. We took all of those and moved all 3 of them up front. So now there's one big cloud over the top of me, and it's at a little bit of an angle. It's about 12-degree angle or something like that. So we bolted all those together and hung them. That was the biggest pain in the ass I've ever been a part of. But nothing like working on ladders over the console. Because again, the console was here the whole time.
Yeah.
So, And then hanging, 60-pound speakers over my console. That's always exciting.
Oof.
So getting those in place, getting that circle, drilling holes through the clouds, mounting the poles, getting the speakers on, all that stuff. It's all just,
No, you don't do all that by yourself.
No. I had Mike Fahey, my assistant. I had Cohen Terry, one of Mitch's assistants. I had David Deals, one of Mitch's interns. And then I had my friend Marty O'Flaherty from time to time on the build out. And then I hired a guy, Andrew, man, sorry, Andrew. I can't remember his last name, but I hired him. He's actually one of Mitch's clients. And so, just came in and worked, and, I put it on Instagram. It's that's hard work.
Yeah.
On the third day of working with Marty, I hyperextended my knee. And so the fourth day of that, that's like the third or fourth of one of those videos, I'm just like sitting down a lot because I was like, God dang it, like, I can't hardly walk. I was just like hobbling around, But the guys did a great job, and they killed it. And
it's stressful just to oversee that kind of stuff, though. I know from doing a lot of things.
And all of that was happening while I still had no idea when the speakers were coming.
Yeah.
So, and I had a record. I produced a band from France called the Inspector Clouseau.
Nice.
And we were supposed to start in October. Yeah. Supposed to start in October, and they couldn't get a visa. And so when they opened the border on the 1st of November, they literally were on the first plane, man. They were on the plane here. And so instead of now having a month to make the record, we now had 2.5 weeks, because I had Thanksgiving, and then right after that, I had to go into another record. So all that, I was shuffling things around to get all that done, to try and, get our speakers in. So while I was mixing their record, which was the first week of December, the speakers came in.
That's amazing.
And so,
would you recommend to anybody else, or even to yourself, that it's better to have a deadline and some project that you got to do to get the studio stuff done?
Always.
Otherwise, you'd just still be doing the studio, right?
Well, I mean, look, one of them costs you money. One of them makes you money.
Right.
You have to make money to spend money, So yeah, it was weird for me to like take a whole month out and then suddenly be like, all right, I'm going to take a month off and I'm going to spend $75,000.
Amazing. Amazing.
It's like, yeah, I mean, the ATCs, the speakers, all the gear, all the stuff that took. I bought $1,200 worth of Mogami fan outs. I could have made them, but you know what? I don't have time.
No. You got to get the thing done. I did want to ask you about your overhead speakers and leaving those passive. Is there a logic behind that, or is that just the way it works?
It's the size of the speaker. ATC doesn't make a speaker that size powered.
Okay. All right, cool.
So yeah. So I mean, I could have put something else up. I mean, I could have put 25s up, but if I did 25s up here, that's a bigger mount because they're very heavy. They're 80 pounds or 70 or 80 pounds, something like that. I don't know. And these are not. So it's a bigger, heavier mount, more expensive mount. And then I would have probably at that point had to have gone with 45s on the side and rear, which wouldn't fit in my rack.
Right, right.
So it's kind of a thing like, okay, well, and PMC has a really nice speaker they call the Wedge that mounts on the wall. That works really nice, but I just wasn't sort of into the mixing and matching part of it. But that would have worked. That would have worked for the side speakers.
Have you ever wished you could remove the click track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I've been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. If If you've ever wanted to truly feel like a magician in the studio, then Isotope RX is your magic wand. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you on Instagram about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version are they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or a computer back in the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more mixed-up mix messages from the band. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music, and it all works in your browser with no downloads required. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at Samply.app and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Vance Powell, joining us from Sputnik Sound. We're going to jump into the second half of the show, a.k.a. the jam session. Vance, are you ready to jam, my friend?
Sure, man. I'm always ready to jam.
I figured as much, man. Appreciate you being back on the show with us, and we love hearing from you, so thank you again. I thought I'd jump into talking about some of the records that you've been doing. You're always doing a ton of stuff. But some of the new things that came across that we included in our discography playlist for you, which Rockstars, you can just scroll down and click play on this stuff if you want to go listen to these records. You did some cool stuff with Chris Stapleton. It's like collaborations and covers and stuff. Metallica, Santana, Tom Morello.
Yep.
You did some stuff with Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band and Old 97's 12th. And I wondered if you wanted to just share some stories about that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, the great thing about working with Chris is that he's not afraid of working with artists that are outside of his genre. I mean, there's a couple I left off. I mean, we did a track with Adele. We did a Taylor Swift track. We did a track with Kelly Clarkson. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we did this last year, but the things that I thought were really cool that Chris did. First of all, for the last couple of years, with COVID, they couldn't tour, but they had a record. We had this record Starting Over, right? Which I think is great, and won a couple CMA awards a couple months back for that, and which is cool. And CMAs this year put the engineer for Album of the Year into the award winning, which is great. Because it used to be only the engineer and the mix engineer for Single of the Year was won a CMA. So they're learning. They're getting there. They're getting there. But all that being said, we did a track with Tom Morello, which was great. We cut it over at RCA, and then we did overdubs here. But Chris had got what I was getting at earlier. Sorry, I got sidetracked there with Tom. But Chris has this rehearsal space. Now, it started for just a place where he could store all his gear that wasn't a warehouse, like climate controlled, And then when COVID happened, it was sort of like, well, maybe we'll put some couches in here and some carpet. And so they carpeted it, and they got a little bar. And I mean, it's very cool, right? And so when the record came out, kind of I think it came out in August or November. It came out after the cutoff for the Grammys for 2020, but came out in 2020. They wanted to do all the TV shows. So this will actually get to a question you're going to come up later with Facebook about this recording rack. So a few years back in 2017, I designed a rack for Chris to take on the road. And now we've expanded it a bit. It has a Mac Mini with an HDX card in it, and it has 64 inputs from 64 channels of Burl converters that are fed by CAPI VP28s. There's, I think, 12 platinum VP28s, and the rest of them are just regular VP28s. Now, somebody was asking about snakes and all that. All that stuff is that it comes from the stage. It hits a big Claire transformer splitter, comes to one feed comes to record, one goes to monitors, one goes to front of house. So what we're doing on the record side has nothing to do with front of house or monitors. It's totally separate. And we're just archiving every show.
But so it's the live mics?
Though, it is right? The live mics, yeah. Plus 12 audience mics. Right?
That's the answer I always get about live recording is like, don't skimp on the audience mics.
12 audience mics. So there are 10 up front. There's a left and right pair of shotguns on the far side. One set pointing out to the side, one like an arena up and to the side, one facing out into the center of the crowd. And then there's 451 type mics across the front. And right in front of Chris, there's an XY pair, right? So two on the left side, there's 2 shotguns, a stage left center mic, a center left right mic, and then a stage right, and then 2. And then there's an XY pair out in front of house.
All pencil mics, not large diaphragm.
Well, the 4 of them are shotguns. They're shotguns, and then the rest of them are pencils. Yes, no large diaphragms. No need for all that low end.
I've heard that shotguns are remarkably flat response.
They are, and they're frightening. That if you like you can literally put on headphones and go out and pick out conversations in the crowd.
Wow,
it's really crazy. But if you just point them out into the center of the audience, you just get audience. You don't get the room, which is great. I mean, you do get the room, of course, but more audience. But
yeah, and because the audience is so far away where you're pointing them, you get like a nice big view of the audience.
And the pencil mics across the front, you get that up front clapping and you get that excitement. You also usually get some dumbass talking about some stupid shit, which happens all the time. I did I did this movie called Under Great White Northern Lights, and they kind of recorded that on a shoestring budget. And one of the things that they did is they had a mic on the left side of the stage, a mic on the right, and then 2 at front of house. For the entire run, one of the front of house mics was broken. But at one of the shows, the front mic, it like fell down or something. And all you get through the whole thing is this dude trying to talk up these chicks. And he is trying his best. And they're not interested in this guy, right? But he's talking about how he's never heard of this band. He doesn't know anything about them because there was a show, it's in Canada, up in Yellowknife, Yukon, right? He's like, he has no idea who the band is, but hey, it's a show. He's going to see it. And so while we were mixing, I was like, check this out. I kept pointing out to Jack, and he's like, put that in the right rear speaker and just leave it there for somebody to just find this little, little audio Easter egg of this guy just trying to pick up these girls and getting turned down. But so that's what Chris's rig's for. Now, here's what's cool. When we went into the rehearsal space, they had a full Claire monitor rig, full, front of house rig, but no PA or anything. And then we had the record rig. So we just started recording. So I did a Jimmy Kimmel, I did Colbert, I did Fallon. We did a couple other things for some private stuff, all recorded there at the rehearsal space and then mixed here at my place. And so when we did the Tom Morello and we did actually first we did the Metallica song, we cut it there at the rehearsal space, and then we came over here to mix. And that was fun because there's some fun stuff in there. There's a air raid siren that we found. We found a sample
Nice.
Yeah, we just found a sample on freesamples.org called Cocaine Air Raid. We were like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we need on this track. And so that was fun. And but then when we did the Morello at RCA, we just came over here and mixed it, which is cool. And then the Santana track was actually recorded and mixed all here at Sputnik, which was cool.
Right on. But of course, now you guys are doing all these kind of remote things with the different artists, and people are sending files or anything like that? Or you were able to still get some people together and rock out?
All of these, everybody's tested every day. Everybody's tested every day. So,
oh boy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a little bit of a bubble. You know, you kind of work inside a bubble.
Right. Right.
But like we did the Adele track, we did via Zoom audio movers and talkback switches. So I have, we're talking on it actually right now. I have a talkback mic here that I only use for this kind of thing. And then I have the talkback on my console, which I think if I hit my talkback, you'll hear it. Hold on, let me see here. Hello, Lidge. Oh, no, it's not working. Okay, it's not.
No, it sounds like the same one.
Yeah, well,
sounds really good, man. Nice talkback.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a Austrian Audio OC14 or whatever it is. Very nice mic. But I have a wire. I think Mike just pulled it. I think it's just disconnected from my console, from the talkback on my console that goes to my Apollo. So we set that up over Zoom, right? And then I audio movers the audio to them and then their audio back to us so that they could talk to Chris. Chris came in the side door, sang, went out the side door. I mean, I sort of saw him for a second, you know?
So the audio movers, it's funny how before all this, I was so intrigued by that. And then when we all could start doing this remote stuff, it's fascinating. And I bet most of us are just sick of doing anything that has to do with the internet and video right now. And we just want to, rock out in the studio. But the audio mover stuff is cool because you can set it up to send stuff to somebody, but then you set it up to receive a different channel. So you were doing it where you were sending Chris's voice to them, right? They had the session.
I was sending the mix. I was sending the session with Chris' voice to them. They were listening and saying, "Yeah, we love it," and there was a lot of cursing and stuff.
Awesome.
Which was fun. A lot of jumping up and down. It was fun.
That's awesome.
And then their talkback came to me through Zoom. And I had my laptop out in the room with Chris. So their talkback just came through my speaker on my laptop. But Chris talking was going, he had a camera on him, but Chris talking was going from my session through audio movers to them.
So it's interesting to me because with audio movers, it's possible to like have a session here and have somebody play an instrument somewhere else and you're feeding them the session, they're playing along and it's coming back to you to hear it. There'd be delays in there, but it is possible to have a remote overdub. That's not
exactly the best way to do it.
Right.
That's not, Source Connect's been trying to do that forever.
Yeah.
And at one point, Source Connect reached out to me about doing this multi-channel. That was a big multi-channel thing. I did whatever. I just wasn't interested in it. But they do build good product. I think Audio Movers is superior for a few reasons. Source Connect only runs at 48K, whereas Audio Movers will run at any sample rate. Audio Movers will send anything from 128 kilobit AC3 all the way up to 32-bit waves.
Right.
So it'll send PCM. If you've got the data bandwidth, it'll send full PCM.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's flexible. It sort of has some flexibility.
And there's a multi-channel version. There's all kinds of things with first of all, it got bought by Abbey Road EMI. So they're gonna forward this for sure.
Yeah, that's great.
But what I've been doing, so the other half of this is that I've always been mixing remotely. I mean, we all have been. The internet has made it so people. I'm mixing 2 songs today that are coming from LA. I just set up a Zoom, right? I put a Zoom up in this computer here, and I put it on my second monitor. So I put the Zoom up there, and then I have audio movers going, and I just have their talk back to me. I have it coming in basically so that using that program called Mutronic, I loop it into my session so that when I hit play, it mutes.
Yeah, I use one, Mutamatic.
Mutamatic, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Mutamatic.
Shoot, I forgot the name of the company.
Yeah,
sorry.
it's free. It was nice. It was free.
It's fantastic. I use it for my talk back on the studio so that I'll have a hyper compressed mic out on the floor with the band. And every time we stop tape, it'll open up that channel so that if anybody talks, you can kind of hear each other.
You sold your tape machine. Stop that.
I do that without a tape machine. I do that stuff with just Pro Tools.
But you said tape.
Oh, did I? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we don't stop tape anymore.
I'll never stop saying tape. All right. Well, so let me see here. Let me jump into some of these Facebook questions from everybody. Sure. So we don't forget anything, and then we can always come back to more stuff. Gosh, there was one. I'll start right at the top. Make sure that the first ones that came in get hit up. So thanks for sending in your questions, Rockstars. A reminder, again, if you're not already in the Facebook group, come join it so that you can do this kind of stuff. rsrockstars.com/FB will take you there, or just go to facebook.com/groups/recording studio rockstars, or just search it in there. You'll find it and submit it, and then we'll let you in. So here's one from Donnie Hill. He was asking about how you got started, which I reminded him that on episode 2, you gave us a really great.
Just go back to that.
Yeah. So Vance,
or go to Tape Op, or go. I mean, you've
told that story so many times. Yeah, live music, studio stuff. Here we are.
Live music, studio, all of the above.
Yeah. All right. And again, great takeaways from that are all the things you learned from kind of putting in your dues and being under the time pressure and everything. Those are all super valuable for the studio. So here's one from Eric Lee. Eric said he wanted to just, of course, hear about everything from Atmos, or everything about Atmos, especially about the spatial audio binaural rendering. Apple Music uses their own renderer, which you mentioned, spatial audio instead of the Dolby Atmos renderer. So how can we monitor our mixes through different systems for ensuring translation? You addressed that in a lot, but one thing I thought I would point out to add to that is this idea of spatial and binaural, which I think is worth talking about. There's all these different speaker arrays, but most of us just have headphones, and we might just have earbuds, and that's the real world out there. Or cars, what are people going to hear in their cars? What are some thoughts about that? I know that in the future, hopefully Apple and companies will take your scanning thing and you'll scan your ears, and then you'll have these modelings where.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to do that. That's what
that's a little creepy, right?
Sony does that. That's weird. So here's the deal. Apple has their own renderer. As it is now, any Atmos file that we generate, you can export an MP4. And what you do is you export an MP4 to your iCloud Drive or whatever. And then in iCloud Drive, since iCloud Drive goes to your Apple iPhone, this is all for Apple people. Those of you who don't have one, you're kind of screwed here a little bit, but not really. I'll get to that in a minute. You can, from iCloud Drive, you can open it on your phone. When you open it on your phone, it will play back. If you have AirPod Pros or AirPod Max or the new AirPods, it will play back using the Apple Spatial Audio Renderer. Now, I would suggest spending $600 if you're a professional and buying the Pros, the Max, the AirPod Max, because A, they are super comfortable. B, they're really great on airplanes. They're super quiet. The noise canceling is amazing, and they sound really good. So you can play them back from your phone. Now, if you're an Android user, you actually have the Atmos renderer in your in your phone. So your phone will play back out of whatever music, whatever you're going to find, an Atmos file. I don't have one, so I don't know exactly how to do it. But it will play it back into the normal binaural renderer. Here in the studio, I have my renderer spits out three, what's called a re-render. They do them in real time. It spits out a 5.1. That's just purely a way for me to check 5.1 here in a 5.1 array. It's only for me. It's no big deal. It spits out stereo, which comes up in it actually comes up in my Avocet. So I can listen on my NS10s in stereo or on my ProAx in stereo. And it comes up in my headphone amp. I have a little Adcom headphone amp over here in binaural. Now, that binaural is not the Apple renderer.
Right, that would be the Dolby renderer.
That's the Dolby binaural renderer. It's very important, though, because you need to do that because not everybody in the world is listening through AirPods.
What headphones do you grab when you're going to do your binaural check?
I've got these Focal, what are they called? Clear MG Professionals. They're about the most comfortable headphone I've ever worn, ever. And they sound freaking amazing. They're also stupid expensive. So,
yeah, Focals make some really wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, these are really nice. I think they're about 17, 18, $2,500, something like that. They're expensive.
Okay, so that's exciting to hear.
Doesn't matter. Whatever your favorite headphone, listen to it on that. That's actually better. Listen on your favorite headphone.
Yeah.
You know, and if you are an Apple ecosystem user, you can listen through the renderer just by playing the file out of the files folder or iCloud Drive, either one of your phone.
Now, it's too bad that you have to do the iCloud thing first, because otherwise, again, audio movers could have come in handy and you could just stream it over to the phone. Again,
we're back to a thing that has to be a tool that Apple and Dolby, or not even Dolby, but just Apple has to have. Apple has to build a tool to do that.
Yeah.
Do I think they're going to? Cross my fingers, but I believe they will because they want that. You know, in a perfect world, what Apple would do is Apple would just use the Dolby renderer. Then we'd all be cool.
Right.
But, you know, Apple likes to control technology. They don't like to pay licenses.
Right.
You know,
good point.
And there's a reason why they're the most, you know, they're the biggest company in the world, you know.
The STX100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX600 modules, combining the STX100 mic pre and C610 into a single 500 module. Now you can get the same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's BBDI and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini, and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports, enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries at my studio, and it works great. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. I don't remember whether Atmos comes built into Pro Tools or if that's something that you buy separately.
It does.
Okay, it does.
It does and it doesn't. The ability to do Atmos does, but normal rock stars could get into Atmos in binaural or stereo mixing by purchasing the Dolby Atmos production toolkit.
Right.
Now that is an audio engine that replaces whatever your mix engine is currently. Okay. So in other words, you're going to have to set up how the speakers work. You're going to have to set up all that, but you can do binaural and stereo mixing in that app. No problem. You just have to figure out the monitoring, but it goes to Pro Tools and comes back. I mean, the render comes back in stereo or binaural. You can set it up to do it. You can also set up to multiple speakers. You can do it, but you have to spend more money to get the mastering to actually make a real Atmos, like just distribution quality master.
Right. Okay, cool.
And that's $1,000 or something like that.
It's very exciting the idea that we can begin to dabble in this, and that with a pair of headphones, you can start figuring it out. Yeah. So I just pulled up Dolby Atmos Production Suite, which maybe that's what you're talking about.
Yep.
It's about $300 for that.
Yeah.
And that's a full license. So
now Logic has, I believe it's the Apple renderer built in, or a Dolby Atmos.
That would make sense.
The current version does. But like everything, there's problems with everything. So part of it is, if you're a Logic user, it'll be easy. But I'm sure the hell not going to learn Logic. I own it, and I've owned it forever. Just because I have to open it. Sometimes people send me Logic sessions.
Yeah.
Same thing. Same reason I own Cubase. Same reason. I don't want to learn it. I don't have time.
Yeah.
Or Luna, which is awesome. But to use it every day I can't do it.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway for us too, because rock stars don't feel the pressure to try and really know every platform. You're going to have a main one that you get really good at, and everything else you'd need to know enough to use it.
And the longer you do this, the more you'll have to own other things.
Yeah.
I mean, I mixed a record a little while back, and when they sent it to me, they sent all these Reason files, all these things for Reason. And I was like, well, I haven't owned Reason in like 10, 15 years. So I had to buy Reason, and they're like, oh, sorry, we didn't know how to render these and blah, 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 because they're guys working in their bedroom, So I bought Reason.
Did you hit the tab key and still find that you still got excited when the rack flipped around and you saw the cables move around?
Oh, yeah.
I remember when that was coming and my buddy was telling me, he's like, they're building this thing. And I was like, oh, that would be so amazing.
Back in 2000.
How often are we going to continue to say, oh man, when we get that, it's going to be so amazing, until we finally learn and we're like, you know what? What's really amazing is to just make great music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the deal. I mean, we're, I don't know the best word to put it, but we're on a path where we've got everything,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got everything we need, I didn't really want to buy. I mean, I didn't want to jump into this, to be honest with you, but it makes good financial sense for me to do it now. The funny thing about, if you have a good year, if you've been busy and you're having a good year, if you don't reinvest money into your studio, you just are investing in the government. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't mind paying taxes, but I'd rather invest in myself, or invest in my business. So, that's kind of the deal. If you have a good year, you should reinvest. And I needed to kind of reinvest a little bit of money this year, because I really have hit the end of my mean, I don't know how much more gear a guy needs,
Right.
I know people with more gear.
Well, I think you need a rack like that, but on the other wall.
Thought about it. I could do it. I have tons of other stuff. But I'm not there. I just don't want to do that, so.
Come on, man. 2 mics over tanks any day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, except for maybe reverb tanks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Good point. All right. So here's a question that comes in from Trent Jones. He said, I always love the episodes with Vance. I'm interested in his take on how the consumer side of Atmos is developing. Does he think that the full glory of Atmos mixes will translate on consumer level playback equipment? For instance, some companies are marketing Atmos sound bars and stuff, but I'm curious about whether they can deliver the surround experience that a proper Atmos mix room can. So what are your thoughts about, if you want to expound on that even more, about just what the consumer is going to experience?
There are a couple companies who are building very, very good Atmos sound bars. Sennheiser, a lot of the film mixer dudes, that's what they're testing on. But I will say Sonos, and I'm a big Sonos proponent, by the way. I have I think it's 23 Sonos speakers in my house, so I have a lot of Sonos. I have a Sonos Arc in my living room, which is a Sonos. It's a Atmos sound bar. I have a sub, and then I have 2 surrounds in the back. The Arc has 4 speakers that fire up onto the ceiling to throw sound on the ceiling. It has speakers that fire out the side to do the wides, and then speakers that fire forward. It really, to do it right, you really need the sub for sure. And surrounds really help. Speakers in the back really help. But my living room sounds, to me, as good as any other, theater I've been in. Better, in fact, because, it's closer to my bar, if you know what I mean.
And the swimming pool.
Yeah. So it's really, really nice. But
how important is symmetry in your living room for that kind of thing?
Well, my living room is against the front wall of the house. In other words, like the front of the house. So my TV fires longwise,
Okay.
And then on the left side, it's all open into my dining room and kitchen. So symmetry doesn't sort of mean anything in there, but it still sounds good. There's 3 walls, 3 sides, and then a big open side.
Yeah.
But it sounds great in there. And I would tell anybody, if you don't believe it, man, I'll come and play. I'll play music for you, and I'll be happy to play a good movie for you. That's in Atmos in there. There's on Apple Plus. Or on Apple TV, Apple Plus, there's a movie called Greyhound. It's a Tom Hanks movie. It's a destroyer World War II
a good
movie. One. It's great. Well, you should hear that in my living room. It's unbelievable.
Okay, when are we all coming over?
Sure. Anytime. I'll tell my wife. She'll be like, nope.
Not today.
Not today. But no, she'd be like, fine, come on over. I don't care. Except for in a pandemic. But the deal is that has full. I don't even think anybody's mastered Atmos yet. Now, there are people like, I think Mills is doing great work. Steve Genowick doing great work. But by the same token, I've heard some really bad Atmos mixes. And when I say bad, like I can't even imagine it. There's I don't even want to bring up who it is or whatever. But there's a couple mixes where I'm just like, okay, this was a test. Somebody thought this would be cool. Like, let's put the whole band in front of me, and let's put the singer behind me. Right?
Right.
Which is fine, except for I don't really want the singer behind me ever. Ever.
Might be a little creepy.
Well, you just have to hear it. It's cool. The mix is cool. It's just, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense.
Has anybody done Bohemian Rhapsody and put all the voices in different locations?
Oh yeah, they've done. Yeah, you can, if you go on Tidal, you can hear Tidal Bohemian Rhapsody. I played it yesterday, matter of fact. No, not Friday. Well, I played it here on Friday.
I'm looking forward to the point at which people are composing in surround, because I think that's where it's going to really make a difference.
Happening. It's already happening. A lot of your new artists, The Weeknd, Post Malone, they are taking Atmos mix first. You know, Post Malone's last record, the Atmos mixes of it are amazing, and The Weeknd is very good too. I mean, I think Post Malone's super talented. I mean, I wouldn't put all the I wouldn't tattoo my face for anything. But hey, man, you be you go be you. Music's good. He's great. He's a very big talent. Do I listen to it all the time? No, it's not my thing. Same thing with The Weeknd. Definitely talented, but that kind of structure, that pop music thing. The thing that's interesting about Atmos is, you can't make it loud.
Okay.
You can't make it loud. So there is now I don't know anything about LUFS or any of that shit. I mean, I don't really care. But Atmos renderer there's an idea that Dolby's saying you need to be around this, and that's -18, right? Now this -18 figure is a long-term figure, taking all the channels and all the entropy and all the stuff involved in that and putting it together. Because anything over that very far, and you'll start clipping the renderer. And what happens is the renderer, when it renders to binaural and stereo, starts limiting. Now there's no limiter on the Atmos feed, but there are limiters on stereo and binaural. And once that limiter and binaural starts kicking in, it's not pretty sounding.
Yeah.
So the more, I know this is going to sound stupid, the more processed your tracks are ahead of time, the better it's going to go into Atmos. Because you can't really bus compress things in Atmos. You can bus compress a bed, right? But that bed is just a bed. Objects you just individually compress, but that bed and the objects, they don't tie together. There's no link.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can't sidechain an object compression.
There are ways to do it without auxes and all this other stuff, but to be honest with you, it gets to be a bit of a timing nightmare.
Yeah. You've got latency issues, and like you might have to use time adjuster here and there.
Well, yeah, that's what I hear. I've never done that. Yeah. I haven't experimented with that, but I have experimented with having beds and using like a bus compressor on a bed, a multi-mono compressor linked together, and it works pretty okay, kind of.
Do you think that mixing will be a multi-stage process where you do a stereo mix and then you separately do a surround mix, or do you think that you will?
That's interesting,
because with your Dadman, switching between those is almost like the same way we would switch between multiple speakers for a reference. You can immediately go like, there's the big surround, there's the smaller surround, there's the stereo. Cool. It feels right, and just flipping around a lot.
Yeah, you can do it really easy with Dadman. Here's the conundrum. At some point, I don't want to be the harbinger of doom here, and I would hate for this tweet not to age well, but at some point the record labels are going to want one file.
Right. And then they'll want stems after that.
Well, no, let's ignore that part. They're going to want, when I say one file, they want one master.
Yeah.
Now that one master can be the stereo, or that one master could be an Atmos that encompasses stereo, binaural, and Atmos. If we get to that point, right, where a label that's invested heavily, like let's say Universal in Atmos, just says, you know what, we don't want anything but an Atmos mix now. Because Apple is invested in it big time. Dolby's
when was the last time a label asked you for a mono mix?
Never.
Exactly. But it used to be that way. That used to be the only mix you turn in.
Well, yeah, but not in our lifetime.
Yeah.
I never turned in a mono mix ever, But like they're gonna want stems, they're gonna want files, they're gonna want all that shit anyway, right? They're gonna want all that anyway. That being said, at some point they're just gonna want Atmos. Now, I may be wrong, but because Atmos encompasses the stereo blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I think the takeaway is whatever works best for turning in an Atmos mix is going to determine what everything else has to do to add up to that best file.
Right.
So that'll change.
You were talking about my console earlier. I haven't quite got it 100% figured out, but I don't know that I can actually use my console for Atmos mixes.
Wow.
And so I know there are people who are doing it. So so there are ways to do it. I just haven't spent enough time to figure out the sort of the pitfalls yet of it.
Right. So stand by, rock stars.
Yeah. So I haven't quite
tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. I haven't quite figured it out yet. There's so much stuff involved in this. I have my rig set up right now, and it will be set up here very soon, so that part of my Dante world is 32 channels of inserts. So I have 32 channels of 32 IO of inserts. Now, those inserts could be my console because I only mix on 32 channels. And those could immediately drop from my console, from Pro Tools, hit my desk, out of the burls, into the desk, out of the desk, into the Dante world, which would then go to Pro Tools, back to Pro Tools, and I could mix in Pro Tools from my desk.
So essentially, let me see if I'm getting this right. I'm probably not, but
complicated.
If you had an object, that object could be hitting a channel on the console for the adjustment? No.
The object would be afterwards.
Okay.
So think about it like this. Pro Tools out to the burl, analog into the console through the fader, but out the insert post fader, right? The insert goes to a 32 channel insert in Pro Tools, which then goes to an aux, right? And that aux is my mixer. I mix off that into beds, objects, and all that. That's one way to use my desk.
Right.
I could do automation. I could do the whole thing. So I could do a stereo mix on my desk, right? Then put the inserts in, and then do the Atmos mix from the insert returns.
Well, I think one of the takeaways for us is
that's
just
one
a
of my
reminder
ideas. I have yet to do that, but it is one of the ideas.
Well, again, and my takeaway from that is the reminder to us rock stars that, it's rarely do we know the answer before we do it. We're constantly like, we're like Thomas Edison. You're just going, well, we're not electrocuting elephants, but we're going and we're experimenting and we're trying stuff. And that's how you find out. You try it, you have to throw some ideas away until you finally get the stuff.
Yeah,
that really
I don't
works.
know. I know that. Reed has kind of been doing that for years. He's been re-recording his insert returns for years. So I don't know. We got to see. There's all kinds of things, that I still don't have quite figured out. But this is an engineering challenge that I'm going to try to figure out.
Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mixmaster Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. All right, so here's a question from Stephen Jones, one of my first interns at the studio, actually. What's up,
By the way, I think Eric Lee is one of my clients.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah, he's a good cat.
So Steven wants to know, I'd like to know how much he, meaning you, Vance, relies on analog versus digital gear. Are there specific people or pieces that require specific equipment to create their own sound? And how does he choose the studio he will work from based on the projects he's on? What factors weigh into the heaviest of that in that choice?
Well, the last question is, I'm always going to pick mine because it's mine.
Yeah.
Right. I try not to go to other studios if I don't have to. But if I was to record a 9-piece band, it'd be a little hard here. I mean, I could do it. I'd figure out how to do it, but it'd be a bit tough. So, there's that. I'd probably go to Sound Emporium or Blackbird or something, and not to pick one of those over the other, just other studios in town that would handle that kind of
stuff.
Analog gear, digital gear. So I do mix on a console. I do mix analog. There's a big wall of gear behind me right now that I use for tracking, some of it, and some of it's mixing. And that's really kind of the deal. It's kind of half and half. Some of it obviously overlaps, but there are certain pieces of gear that I use for certain people. Like I have Stapleton's vocal chain. I have a U47 and I have a Coles 4038 and then a pair of 1073s and then either my Unfair Child or Dave Cobb's Real Fairchild. And that's his vocal chain every time. That's these same two mics and the same two mic pre's and the same compressor. That is his chain every time. So yeah, there are certain pieces of gear that I use for certain people all the time. I've got a rack of 1073s behind me because that's what I want for guitars and vocals. That's what I want. So that's what I'm asking for. But when I'm mixing, sure, I use 32 returns from Pro Tools into my desk. I take, no matter what size of the mix, it always comes back to 32 channels, right? And I sum things together and blend things together to 32 channels. And then I'll use plugins all over to get what I want. So,
And Rockstars, we have, Vance has generously given us a download. So in the previous episodes, you should still find links to a Pro Tools session template, that talks where you demonstrated how you would route this stuff and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. And the template is basically a digital version of my analog workflow.
Right.
And it works.
And we understand that this is an evolving process. So
yes, exactly.
Moving forward in the future, that may not be the same thing, but it should be pretty enlightening for you to check out Rockstars. So I don't know if I'll have the link in here, but it's definitely in the previous episode. So check that out.
Yeah.
Right.
And I actually mixed a record this year. It's not out yet for Sammy Hagar.
Nice.
And it was great. It was Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony, Jason Bonham, Vic Taylor. I mean, it was amazing. We cut almost the whole record live. Sammy kills it, man. Guy's 74 years old. He kills it. And because of speed, I just mixed it in the box. I tracked it and I just mixed it in the box. And because we were on a short time frame, and I used that template, and it just works.
Did you tell Sammy that you can't mix 55? I
told him that for sure. I can't mix that 55.
Nice, man.
He's very funny, man. He's one of those guys who, like, every now and then he just called me one day. And I was like, "Hey, Sammy, what's up?" He goes, "Man," like everything is he's so excited. It's like, "Man, I love this. It's so awesome." And my butt called you. I go, oh, it's a butt call. He goes, "Yeah, sorry, man. Actually, I called you. I just wanted to tell you that I love the record." I was like, "Thanks."
That's great.
That's great. Pretty hilarious.
All right. So here's a question from Scott Anderson. Scott asks, can you ask him about the mixing work he did on my good friend Lauren Morrow's upcoming record?
Yeah.
They said that Vance was so great to work with, and I've heard the result, and it sounds amazing.
Oh, well, Parker Kaysen did all that, tracked all that. And he did a great job. And that's Buzz Kaysen's son, by the way. And he did a great job, produced it. And she's a real talent. And it was a fun thing. I mean, I mixed it on my desk. I used the same things I kind of mix everything with. So I mean, it wasn't anything that was like, oh man, I'm just getting out this one thing for this record. So that, it was great. She was awesome, and her husband's great. And I think they might paint my studio.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you didn't want to be a harbinger of doom, but I'm looking at the rack behind you, and I'm wondering if you actually have a guitar pedal mounted there called the Harbinger of Doom.
No, I don't, but I should.
You should. Can you make one? Can you be the Harbinger of Doom for our sound?
Yeah. It would just you plugged in and you get
a perfect Atmos and stereo mix.
No, you plug a guitar into it, and it comes out sounding like all those 80s guitars with tons of chorus.
Hell yeah. All right, here's another one, a quick one from Stephen Jones. He says, also Vance mentioned recording in 2010 at NAMM with a particular artist. He was going to record everything direct cut to record via a large horn. Did that happen? And what were your challenges if it did happen? Does that ring a bell?
It did happen. Was it 2010? It seems later than that. So there was talk around that time that we were going to do a bunch of, I remember now. So that actually did happen. That was a Jack White. It was a Jack White thing that he did with.
Sounds like it.
He did that. It's called. I didn't do it. It was done with T-Bone. And they recorded onto wax cylinders.
That's
acoustic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's the large horn is the reverse horn to capture the sound.
Yeah, I didn't do that. Now, I have recorded on a wax cylinder before down at NTSU. I recorded an artist down there once. It was fun. Just one little thing we did.
That stuff is really fun. I haven't done any kind of wax cylinder stuff, but just even getting a hold of old tape machines and stuff like that. It's fun to record on the old stuff. All right. Well, let's see. Here's one that comes in. We got a few from David Strite, a classmate of mine, actually, who needs to come on the show. David, you need to come on the show, buddy. We'll make that happen. So his first question was asking you about the playback volume control of your Atmos, which you mentioned.
Dadman.
Yeah. All right. And then he was saying, how often are smaller and independent labels and artists wanting Atmos mixes? Did they see the value in the format? I guess we didn't really talk about the smaller labels yet.
Not yet. I mean, there are people who are interested in it. It's just a financial thing now. If I can make one mix, if I can make one mix and they're happy with the stereo and they're happy with the Atmos, that would be great. I just don't know that we're quite there yet. Yeah,
it's going to take
right now.
discovery.
It's all majors. It's all the majors, and it's going to start. There's going to be a wave of remixing happening. It's coming.
Yeah.
There's a wave of remixing coming, and when that happens, I think that you're going to have a lot more Atmos content, and then it's become more ubiquitous. As it is now, if you just get on Apple Music and you're listening to an artist and you have it shuffling around, if there's an Atmos mix, it plays it over the stereo.
Okay. So you hear that one first.
Yeah. And, a lot of people will just get used to that. And some of them, like there are tracks that maybe shouldn't be remixed. There also is a scary plugin called made by Nugent called Upmix, and I was just fooling around with it the other day because I bought it just to have it, and I had actually used it converting a long stereo program to 5.1 for a DVD release because we didn't have enough time or money to remix the whole thing in 5.1. And so I spent a couple days over at Blackbird using it for the stereo and then just placing a couple stems that I made because it's very long. It's 3 hours and 45 minutes long. It's a live performance. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes. And just moving some objects around, not objects, but just moving around in 5.1, some rear panning, just some effects things. and it was really good. The other day, I opened a stereo mix and sent it to the renderer via this plugin and played it back. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what a lot of people are going to be doing, because it's mindless and it's okay. Is it creative? No, not at all. But it has a couple things that are interesting. One, you can link the up mix to the down mix. So in other words, the stereo file has to match the down mix. You know what I'm saying? So you have a little lock, you hit this button and what's going into the up mixer has to match, and it doesn't. And that's the crazy part. That means I can take a stereo mix, up mix it to Atmos and through the renderer, and then the stereo down mix is the same as what's going to it. Now, is it perfect? No. Does it get things wrong? Yes. Does it require you engineering? Yes. Is it something you should be using? I can say that no, and if you have to. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, there's going to be so much to explore with this stuff until we start getting it. And also the notion that there's a one size fits all for the world of music and audio. My gut says that there isn't, and there never has been.
Well, there isn't. And Apple, I know for a fact that Apple has been rejecting mixes without spatial material. So like people taking stereo mixes and just putting it onto a 7-1 bed and then adding a little center and adding a little surround. And then they send it to Apple and Apple goes, nope, that's not a real mix.
Okay.
But I do know that people have had 714 beds approved with just bed tracks, right? So I don't know. We're in the Wild West still.
All right.
So
we got a few more questions. You got enough time to get
through?
Yeah,
I got 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay, great. I'll move quick. I'll jump to the next one. Paul Wolf, of course, wants to know if your beard is longer.
Yeah. No, we have a little chat. We have a little chat thread on Friday nights that we get on together.
Awesome.
We have all through COVID, and so that was a Friday night chat comment. So,
all right. So then Charles, aka Chaz Root, who actually last time I saw Chaz was at one of your parties. That's when I met him, actually. He was interested in your Atmos workflow. I think you talked a lot about that. You're going to do stereo mixes through the console and outboard. I think you answered all that stuff. So Chaz, hopefully we got the answers on that.
And there's lots of questions there still. So.
Yeah. And just a shout out to you, Chaz, you rock. Russ Bledsoe says, please ask for an in-depth info about the mobile rig you created. We talked about that. Great stuff. Moving on to Jeff Steiger wants to know your how do we say Jeff's last name? Is it
Steiger?
Steiger, right? Wants to know your favorite bourbon.
It's a tough one. I have over the years, I have swapped around a lot of what I would call daily drinkers. Although these days we're not really drinking a lot of bourbon. I've been drinking more tequila lately, only because bourbon's a rough day the day after, and tequila sometimes isn't. But I like Wathen's, which is a really nice mid-priced bourbon. That's a really good sort of what I call the day drinker. William McKenna, it's really nice. It's a pretty good day drinker. Bibb and Tucker is a good, we're talking like $35 to $50 bourbons.
The good stuff.
Yeah, well, depends on what you think the good stuff is, but yeah. Bibb and Tucker may be a little higher.
Nice. Well, I'm going to have to go sample those. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free. All right, so here comes our last question in here. Oh, wait, we might have one more, but this comes from Adam Shaw, so we've got a couple. Adam says, after all, and no relation to me, Shaw, after all these years of getting to peak, or maybe Adam, we're related, I don't know. After all these years of getting to peek behind the curtain at what goes into the inexplicable artist magic of music and learning all or some of its inner workings, what is something from the technical side of being an engineer that has diminished that magical element, and what's something that's made it stronger?
Pro Tools, editing, auto-tune, auto-align, auto whatever has diminished it tremendously. Having the ability to have as many tracks as you possibly can use has diminished it tremendously. Having the ability to have a studio in your laptop and be able to go wherever you want to go has diminished it tremendously, even though a lot of people would say I'm crazy. Rick, the music industry used to have guardrails. It had people who, took a large corporation's money and spent money on talent and built that talent and all that. And now all that's gone. Part of me loves that. Trust me, the old sort of alt rock, punk rock guy, loves that shit, fuck the man and all that stuff. But at the same time, owning a studio and having to buy gear and all that people don't give a shit about whether they have it or not. I mean, I just came back from a session in LA. I'm not going to mention the studio, but it's very famous. All right. I worked in their room. It has a big, beautiful Neve desk. And it took 7 hours for them to get the desk to work the day I got there.
Wow.
Why? Because nobody uses the desk. Nobody uses it. A guy brings in his laptop. They set it on top of the desk. They hook up 2 channels to the monitor return. They plug a microphone into one of the channels, and they plug it into his little Apollo on top of the desk. And they party, and they, do whatever they're going to record.
Shoot holes through the ceiling.
And then they leave. Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's a rap thing. I'm just saying that it's anything. It's rock or whatever.
I didn't say that. Hey, it was
Shooter Jennings, I know, is shooting guns and in studios, but look, country guys used to do it too.
Ted Nugent was shooting arrows at the top of A&M studio at the wooden eagle hanging from the ceiling. So
yeah, well, there you go.
Goes all across the board.
He's a genius.
I remember when it took 7 hours on our session to get Pro Tools working. So times they are changing. Yeah.
Well, this was pure maintenance and neglect. And this is, if there's 3 huge studios in LA, right? Let's say there's 3, right? That everybody can name. It's one of them.
Okay, fair enough. So the gauntlet is down, which is, if we're going to do our studios, let's get them working.
The reality is, though, is that they gave us a free day.
Nice.
They had to give us a free day.
And part of the challenge is knowing which part of our studio is expected to be working. Like you can't,
All of it. All of it.
All right.
Everything has to work. Everything has to work. Everything in here works. Everything on this desk works. Everything back here works. Every single thing in here works. Period. It has to work. All of it has to work. And if it doesn't work, you better have a spare, or you better have some way to get around it. I have a channel or two on here that all of it works, but maybe one aux send is funny. You know what? I take the channel out, I clean the aux send out, I clean the button, I put it back in, and it works.
Nice, man. I think we may have just found our intro quote for this episode. So let me jump to our closing question, which I've asked you before, Vance. This is going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You go back in time and give yourself a bit of advice. You say, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio. Maybe, I don't know where you want to go to, but maybe we just go back to before you just did your Atmos system or something. Maybe it's too soon to ask that question.
Yeah, it's too soon.
All right. Take it wherever you want, man. What advice would you go back and give yourself at some stage in your audio journey?
Well, in 1997, I would have told myself to buy Apple at $8.
Okay.
1,000 shares of Apple at $8. I don't even know the math.
What's it at now?
Well, it's split so many times. It's at probably 150 or something. I mean, I bought a bunch of it at $100, right? In the late 90s. No, in the early 2000s. Sorry, mid 2000s. Whenever it was at $100, and then it split twice, and then it split 7 times. So
wow. Now
it split. So it went from $100 to $700, let's say.
Yeah.
And then I had 7 shares of it and at 100 basically. And now it's at 150.
Wow, that's good advice. I mean,
so it's good advice. The thing is, that's not all of it,
Yeah.
What would I do? I would say if I was to go back to my earlier days, is I think I would have just told myself to try harder and be more fearless because I think when I moved to Nashville, the Nashville studio scene was still the Nashville studio scene. It was still a party you couldn't get into, and I would have tried harder. But when I moved here, I had a gig. It paid good money, and then I met my wife, and she had a daughter, and so suddenly I was and all that, and I couldn't just be quite so crazy. But
right,
I had a couple of years here in town where I if I know what I knew now, I would have been knocking down doors.
Yeah,
because I knew I knew what to do. I knew how to do it. I was just afraid that I didn't know what to do. Now, there was a lot of things I didn't know, but I knew how to make records.
I think that's great advice. I mean, for a lot of our particularly young listeners, that moment that you discover that you love doing this stuff and you haven't yet settled down.
I have a whole long diatribe. A lot of times we get Blackbird's students over here. Mark brings them the first week they're here and the last week. And in my intro dialogue, sometimes I'll talk about how I got here. And sometimes I do it in the outro, because in the outro, I talk about the concept of jumping. And that is where you're comfortable doing something and everything is going great. And that means it's time for you to do something else, right? You got to jump.
Yeah.
Now part of me, I can just rewind back and say that I lived in my hometown, my hometown where my parents lived, still live. I lived in a house with 2 girls. It was an awesome house. And I worked for a studio, and I worked for a guy who installed alarm systems, right? And I fixed guitar amps, all right? I quit that job and moved to a city where I didn't know anybody, because there was a studio there and a studio engineer that I wanted to learn how to learn from. And I got in my van and I drove to that town. I took a gig at a club and I lived in my van for a week, and then I found a place to live, and I moved in with these other girls, which is actually strange, not really strange. And then I lived there until I took the job and moved to Nashville and didn't have anywhere to live, and lived in my van in Tammy Wynette's parking lot. I'm not kidding, for a couple days. And then, found a place to live and lived here. And I did that until one day I said, screw it. I'm quitting that job. I'm going to go to work for John McBride, and then I quit that job and I went to work at Blackbird. And then I quit that job and went to work for myself. All those things are scary jumps. You're jumping off into something you have no idea what you're doing, right? I just did it here. I could mix stereo. I had my room. I loved the way it sounded. It had some flaws. I knew it had flaws, but I didn't have to spend $75,000 to fix it. I just had to buy $75,000 for the gear to be able to do Atmos.
Wow.
Because it's and I didn't buy cheap speakers. I bought speakers I wanted.
Yeah.
And so luckily it was at a position in my life where I could do that. I could invest that. I need to spend the next 3 years paying it off. That's how these things work. Good
takeaways. Buy a van, get good at jumping.
Yeah. Well, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to jump, and don't be, the best things that have happened to me. Here's the funny part. I am here in Nashville right now because I got laid off from my job in Joplin, my hometown. I got laid off on Christmas Eve. I got laid off, and I didn't work for 3 months. I didn't go back to work. And I had to hustle, man. And I started doing live gigs. I started doing every session I could possibly do. I started trying to talk people into making records. And then this opportunity to move to Springfield, Missouri came up, and I took it because I had nothing to lose at that point. I got fired working with Tammy Wynette. Not Tammy Wynette. I didn't get fired from that. I got fired working for Martina McBride. I got my ass fired. Now, best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
You know why? Because I went back to work working for Jars of Clay, who then wanted me to do their record. And then their little Christmas record. I did their Christmas record, which we didn't even work on Christmas songs for like 2 days. And then we ended up doing a record that won a Grammy. And that put me into Blackbird and all that.
And they didn't fire you on Christmas Eve.
No. But it
was July when you were doing the record anyway.
Right. But no, it was, we started in January and ended in October.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Donnie Hill. There's your origin story. We got it anyway for you.
It's a lot more complicated than that, but yeah. Don't be afraid to get fired. Getting fired, I love Reed's quote. Getting fired is just a surefire way to know you're not trying hard enough. Or no, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Not getting fired is a surefire way to know you're not working hard enough.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Well, Vance, thank you again for coming on Recording Studio Rockstars. We love having you here. I'm going to keep bugging you every year until you let me, until you say no, what I mean. Yeah, no, man, I love doing it. So, well, we look forward. I'll probably be chatting with you toward the end of the year when we find out how it's been going on Atmos and,
sure.
See how
that'd be great. Let's come back around.
How would you like the rock stars to find you now? Where do you want them to go? What if they need to make their next hit record with you?
My email is vance@vancepowell.com. There's a vancepowell.com studio link that basically has my phone number and my email on it. And that is my phone number on there. So don't start calling me because whatever. You can call me, but just text me or email me first. I have a Wikipedia page that has a bunch of links that go to my management site. My management's the best way to get a hold of me if you want to work. If you want to work with me, go to my management page. That's the best way. That's globalpositioningservices.com. But if you just go to my Wikipedia page, it's on there. I'm on Instagram, Vance a lot. On Instagram, I'm on Twitter, Vance a lot, and I'm on Facebook.
Cool, man. And then Rockstars, we have a playlist. If you want to just go listen to Vance's records right now, just scroll down.
Yeah. And that I need to spend about a day and a half because between 2010 and now, we counted the other day all the songs just in 7 years since 2015 to this year. There were 1,000 songs on my wall.
Wow.
So there's a lot of records that I'm not mentioning there. There's Stray Cats record I did a Fish record. I've done multiple Trey Anastasio tab and live stuff. And, there's all kinds of records that are on there that I didn't just put up there. But I didn't want to give you, 9 hours for the work, Lidge.
You're going to need another lifetime just to sit back and listen to all your work.
I don't want to do any of that. I have to give myself 3 years. 3 years before I can listen to a record. So
good thinking. All right, it used to be 6 months
man.
For me, but I haven't done 1,000 in the past however many.
7 years.
Yeah. Dude, thanks, man. Great to see you.
You got it.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, man. For listening to Rockstars. Cheers.
You got it.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to access many of their plugins. At Sampley.app, sign up for a free account with 2 projects now, and later use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you upgrade to a pro account. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. You will find links to all these awesome sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode. Cheers.